Before we get to the planned video, I just want to take a moment to talk about Palestine. At time of recording, we are 72 days into the Israeli occupation committing genocide against the Palestinian people. If you can, please participate in a protest or other actions around you that will lead to blocking shipments going out to Israel. The US and the UK are complicit in all the death that is happening, all the innocent civilians who are being murdered by Israel's campaign to steal more Palestinian land. If you can't attend a protest, please contact your representatives. You can contact them through calling or emailing or faxing. Like, there are tons of different ways to get in contact with them, and any contact is good. Any pressure to convince them to call for a ceasefire is good. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, please amplify the voices of Palestinians. There are so many people in Palestine who are reporting what's happening. And if you cannot do any of these things, you can participate in the BDS boycott. The boycott is working. Puma has cut ties with Israel, which is something BDS has been trying to accomplish for years. Starbucks has lost $11 billion as of December 5th, I think. So literally 2 months of people not buying from Starbucks, and they've lost $11 billion. We can make a difference, and we can make this ceasefire happen by pressuring people who are supporting Israel. And the ceasefire needs to happen as soon as possible. And once it does, we need to continue to support Palestine to make sure Palestinians can safely live on their land. It's been 75 years of occupation. It should not have been allowed to continue as long as it has. Free Palestine forever and always. And now on to my ramblings of things that are far less important. Hi, hello, it's Rachel. Incredibly late video on the second half of Nancy Drew season 4. I think I'm 4 months late at this point. I'm very sorry if anyone cared. I kind of allowed myself to be late on this because I don't think it's going to get a ton of views, because I just don't tend to get many views for videos where I talk for long periods of time, and I'm sure this will be over half an hour. But for anyone who's interested in my opinions, here we go. So, in case you missed it, I did do a review of the first 7 episodes, I believe. And that was back in July? Maybe June? I don't remember how old it is, but I know it was the summer. And yeah. So, quick refresher on the first half of the season for anyone who needs it. There are a bunch of reanimated bodies that were wandering around, and they spit up this black goo, which then got into Horseshoe Bay's water supply. And the black goo was poisoning people. So people who had memories erased, if they consumed the black goo, it would cause them to recall those memories. And for people who did not have erased memories, it would cause them to be put into the mindset of someone who had committed crimes, and then they would try to reenact those crimes. And these are crimes that have not been solved as they are connected to erased memories. Along with this, the Drew crew discovers a creature in the woods that they know is somehow connected to the black goo. In another thread, Ace confronted Nancy about her lying and saying that she did not have feelings for him, which forces Nancy to confess about Temperance's curse. Nancy and Ace decide that they want to try to break the curse, but the attempt to do a ritual that would do so very nearly killed Nancy. Ace is understandably pretty shaken after this, so he tells Nancy that he wants to give up on trying to break the curse. Nancy is heartbroken by this, but she starts to spend more time with Tristan, just due to cases they end up being forced around each other. And as she gets to know him better and the two of them share a near-death experience, Nancy seemingly comes to peace with this decision and she decides to pursue a relationship with Tristan. Unsurprisingly, this upsets Ace because he's an entitled baby. I don't like Ace. I'm sorry. He drives me crazy. Also, I think I briefly mentioned this in the previous review, but it actually ends up being really important in the final few episodes. So, Bess got into legal trouble when a supernatural entity possessed a boy in town. And there's this organization called the Families for Truth and History, known as FFTH, which is what I'm going to say because it's a mouthful to say that whole name. It's a very conservative coded group, and FFTH wants to remove Bess from running the Historical Society. And if things don't go well for Bess, she could end up deported. So this trial ends up being pretty important. So that should recap most of the first 7 episodes, or most of the important things that happen in the first 7 episodes. So let's talk about the remaining 6. So episode 8, this is Body Swap Shenanigans. So there's honestly not too much to cover plot-wise because it's primarily just the core 5 pretending to be each other. Some of it was really fun, like Tunji pretending to be Bess. Where's his Emmy? That was so good. The British accent, the mannerisms to like copy Bess, like he was perfect. He was perfect. And then Leah pretending to be Nick was also pretty funny. But as for actual important developments that matter beyond the body swap, Nick runs for town council, which is something that had been kind of like in the background, but he actually like gives his speech to get a seat on the town council, and he successfully is awarded the seat. But he decides not to take it after FFTH admits that they are targeting to remove Bess. Nancy and Ace learn of the existence of a secret room at the yacht club, and the secret room is known as the Black Door. So they learn a few things about the Black Door. They learn that a person can come to the Black Door and they complete a ritual which allows them to forget something that they have done. The ritual involves this monster that I briefly brought up, and that we learned that it is called the Sin Eater. Another plot point I feel the need to mention from this episode, because it comes back up later, is that Ace and his father go fishing after this discovery. There's an explosion overboard due to some supernatural stuff that's not really worth getting into, but there's an explosion overboard, and he and Nancy have a phone call where they basically just state how they are important to each other and they want to find a way to get past this awkwardness and stay close. So yeah, just keep that in mind for a few episodes. Episode 9 is then focused on Drew Crew trying to find a way to kill the Sin Eater. We also have Bess on trial this episode, continuing the thread of FFTH trying to oust her. And these two stories end up intertwining as the Drew Crew learns that the Sin Eater can only be killed by a poison made by confessing the original sin that led to its creation. While Bess is on the stand, she confesses the original sin, which was the kidnapping of Indigenous children and the murder of their families. While I appreciate the show's willingness to discuss such a heavy topic and acknowledge that many of us, at least in the US, I can't speak for other countries since I only got education here, many of us are taught a whitewashed version of history. I really think it could have been handled with more care. Because for one, the monologue was used for Bess to argue that the supernatural is misunderstood, which, like, that's not the right time for this argument, to compare the supernatural to actual marginalized identities. Not the best decision. And I mean, I know she's like fighting to stay head of the historical society, and like the trouble she's in is tied up with what she does with supernatural stuff happening in town. But like, to go from talking about a literal genocide against the Passamaquoddy and then to try to be like, but the supernatural is good and you just misunderstand it. Like, did no one in the writer's room recognize how inappropriate that is? Because it's not good. And then two, after seeing the completed season, like, it really feels like lip service because this atrocity's pretty much never acknowledged again by the show, which you can't just bring it up and then not grapple with what this means. And the writers didn't really do that. They just kind of brought it up and they were like, hey, we need to say that this happened because it did. But we're just going to say it and then we're going to not do anything beyond that. Like, it's a first step, it's a necessary first step, but you can't just leave it there. But to return to the show narrative, as the result of this trial, Bess does get removed from her position at the Historical Society, and FFTH gains control. It's very crushing, and looking forward to how the final few episodes wrap up. It hurts a bit more than I think the writers realized, because Bess never really gets the win that she deserved, because she basically spends the remaining few episodes trying to desperately gather material to create a new historical society. And it's 4 episodes at this point, so we don't really get to see that go anywhere. As for the Sin Eater side of things, the Drew Crew comes up with a plan to lure the Sin Eater. The plan is that George commits a sin, she goes to the Black Door and confesses, and then Nancy uses the roundel to track the Sin Eater's movements. While Nancy is tracking the Sin Eater, Nick and Bess continue looking at all the information they have, because they have tons of documents, and they put some final pieces of the puzzle together. So they have all these documents about the 8 reanimated bodies from the premiere, and they have the realization that all these reanimated bodies were previous Sin Eaters. So when a Sin Eater dies, the soul then passes on to a random baby in Horseshoe Bay. And of course, Nick and Bess have this realization too late to stop Nancy from shooting the Sin Eater. So Nancy does shoot the Sin Eater, which then drops a seashell, which is a seashell we had seen earlier in the episode that was asking Nancy to go on the date, which leads to the horrifying realization that Tristan is the Sin Eater. So watching this in real time, I was so furious at this reveal, because, like, of course the writers have to sabotage Nancy and Tristan, because God forbid one of Nancy's love interests is actual competition for Ace. Like, it's the same shit we went through with Owen getting killed off the second he and Nancy started their relationship, or Gil being revealed to be an abuser the second they start to get kind of serious, or Nelson leaving town like 2 episodes after he and Nancy actually acted on their feelings. Like, I'm so tired. Either commit to making the love interest seem like they have an actual shot, and like they actually have the potential to steer a character away from the one that everyone expects them to end up with. Like, make the audience believe the relationship has a shot, or stop wasting everyone's time. Like, this isn't a problem specific to Nancy Drew. I could say this for like probably a solid 2/3 of what I watch. But the constant cycling through of love interest just felt especially egregious on this show, because everyone was only there for a season. So it's like, they're not going to make it to the next season. They're going to be gone. And they wait until the final, like, they wait until the second half of the season for anything to really start going. The reveal is also super annoying because it makes it clear that the Sin Eater plot is just the writers recycling what they did with the Aglaika and Odette. Because, like, we had that whole plot line of figuring out what the Aglaika was and trying to kill it and failing to kill it, and then they finally figure out it's Odette and that they want to try to help her. So they figure out how to separate her from the Aglaika. And now it's like, it's basically the same thing with the Sin Eater and Tristan. They have to destroy the Sin Eater without killing Tristan. Like, repetitiveness, if we ignore the complaint I just shared about romances, repetitiveness has never been a complaint I've had in terms of, like, the narrative. So for it to feel like we're retreading season 2, like, it just made the last few episodes kind of dull. Just made the whole Sin Eater angle, like, kind of boring. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, let's go on to episode 10. So since episode 9 literally ends with Nancy shooting Tristan, episode 10 is then Nancy in a panic as she looks for a way to save him. So through a bit of research, the Drew crew comes to the conclusion that the antidote would be finding the last sin and confessing that. So as they try to figure out how to create this antidote, Nancy talks to Tristan and expresses that she's not sure about how their relationship can progress after learning this. Tristan's obviously hurt because he really likes Nancy, but, like, he understands that being the Sin Eater complicates things. So he doesn't really push, and he just kind of sadly accepts that they are through. After that talk, Nancy and Nick try to help Tristan go through his memories and figure out what the last sin was. They get some vague clues, and as George has her background in law, she knows how to track down people, and she does some investigating to find this last sinner. She successfully finds the person that the clues were referencing, but it unfortunately turns out that it was not the actual last sin. So Tristan is quickly running out of time and in very bad shape, and Nancy enters his mind and talks to Nashua, who is the first sin eater, and he helps her find the most recent sin. So they successfully get the antidote to Tristan, and he's healed. Now, while all of this is happening, Ace has been dealing with a ghost in the morgue. I think we meet the ghost briefly in the previous episode. Bess has come by to try to help talk to her and determine what she wants, but she seems to only want to talk to Ace. So there's like some irrelevant plot stuff happening with the ghost because they're basically trying to figure out her identity, and they find a body that doesn't turn out to be hers. But basically, by the end of the episode, they still have no idea who this is, and Ace barely knows her, but yet the end of the episode he's flirting with her. I don't know. It's weird. It's nonsensical. I don't understand what the writers were thinking with this. I don't understand why they keep forcing romances just to, like, have the characters be unavailable. Like, it's not needed. There's enough drama between Ace and Nancy. Like, why are the writers forcing yet another romance? Especially one this paper thin. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. The episode then ends with Nancy and Tristan having a talk, where Nancy admits that she still has feelings for him and that she wants to try to continue this relationship. But then they are suddenly interrupted by Tristan's parents, who sedate both of them and kidnap Nancy, as it is revealed she was the last sinner. So episode 11, it's a doozy. So Nancy manages to escape Tristan's parents, obviously, and she is just racked with guilt over the fact that she has seemingly done something heinous enough that she felt the need to call the Sin Eater. So she's determined to figure out what that was. Bess lets it slip that she suspects whatever memory the Sin Eater erased has to do with the dead woman that Ace has attached himself to the ghost of. So as Nancy is desperate for answers, she insists that Bess help her talk to the ghost. While Nancy and Bess are trying to figure out a way to do this in secret, as Bess is confident that Ace will be against Nancy talking to the ghost, Ace has been asked by his parents to lead this year's Passover Seder, so he's busy making arrangements for that at the Claw. He also invites the ghost to come, as he wants her to be part of his life outside of the morgue, which, again, it's weird. It's way too fast. I don't buy that there are feelings there. Like, what are the writers doing? As for things with Nancy, of course, escaping the glasses can't be the end of that plan. So it turns out while she was unconscious, Tristan's mother implanted a device inside her body that will deliver a paralytic. And it will force her to participate in a ritual to save Tristan if Nancy does not willingly decide to participate. So now the clock is ticking for Nancy to learn the truth and fix the situation. So Nancy reaches out to the ghost, which causes the ghost a lot of distress, and she causes a violent disruption to the Seder, which inevitably causes Ace to figure out what Nancy is doing, and he gets extremely angry. He tells Nancy to leave the ghost alone and stop trying to solve her death because he doesn't want her to leave, which is just so insanely selfish. Like, I had to pause the episode and just, like, mentally go to the void to scream internally for a long while, because how are you gonna meet this woman, know her for like 2 days, 3 days maybe, and just be like, no, she might deserve the truth of how she died, but I don't want her to know it because I want her to stay here with me. Like, do the writers hear themselves? Like, they really had Ace insist she had to stay because I guess, like, abandonment fears. Um, and it's just like giving the vibe of caring for someone because of what they do for you and not like caring about them as their own person. And it's gross. It's so gross. I don't fucking like Ace. His behavior towards any woman he's been romantically interested in has just been gross. Anyway, as that ends up being a bust, and Nancy does not figure out what her sin was that she confessed. Um, she does indeed get recaptured by the glasses, and the group manages to save her in the nick of time with the help of the FFTH leader, surprisingly, who happens to be the Sin Eater's keeper, which was not that surprising because, I mean, the FFTH is seemingly a town presence that's been around all 4 seasons, but we just heard about them, and it's too convenient they had to be tied up in the Sin Eater nonsense. The episode then ends with Nancy going to see Ace at the morgue, and she has with her evidence that she went to the Sin Eater shortly after that phone call she had with Ace after he had gone fishing, which implies that he is also involved in whatever secret was covered up. And it also, Nancy has the suspicion that this ghost that Ace is attached to, the woman that she used to be, is dead because of something that the two of them did. So, just lovely. What a lovely thing to put on the main pairing of the show that you want the audience to view as heroes. The implication that they have murdered someone. Lovely. And we have 2 episodes left. Just fantastic. I was actively dreading episode 12 because I didn't see a way out of this that didn't just nauseate me. Like, that was not a pleasant cliffhanger to leave us on for a week. So let's talk about episode 12. Ace is resistant to wanting to know the truth, because of course he is. And Nancy being Nancy, she's determined to get answers. So as she and Ace investigate, they determine the identity of the woman, and they end up searching her apartment, which leads to an argument between the two of them, as Ace wants to shield this woman from learning the truth, and Nancy is adamant about letting her know so she can have closure. And, like, did no one else watch this and just think to themselves, good lord, these two are so incompatible? Because, like, this argument that they had just proved how completely dysfunctional they would be as a romantic pairing. Because just, like, the way Ace was like, willfully misunderstanding Nancy's motives and like twisting things to try to paint her in a bad light in this situation. Like, it's just it's insane to me because he's he's angry at her for refusing to let a mystery go, a mystery that she is quite literally at the center of. And like, this is Nancy. All she's been doing has been digging for the truth since you've met her. Like, what do you expect? And it's just, how are the writers giving this soulmate treatment? I don't understand. Anyway, after taking time to process what they've learned about this woman, Ace finally decides that he needs to face the truth. Nancy has an artifact that can show them the erased memory, and they agree to use it together. And so it turns out that fishing trip I had mentioned that Ace went on with his father, this woman had been the captain of the boat. And there was a freak accident due to that explosion I had mentioned. And the woman got locked in the bridge, and a fire started. So she was trapped in the bridge, and Ace's father had fallen overboard. So Ace had the intention of saving both of them, but he went to save his father first, and by the time he had successfully made sure his father was okay, this woman had died. Ace then called Nancy because he was distraught over this accidental death that he feels he could have prevented if he had been faster. And Nancy, not knowing what else to do, called the Sin Eater to try to ease this pain for Ace. And I mean, I guess that's pretty much the only resolution the writers could have given this that wouldn't have had the viewership up in arms. Because I don't really know what other explanation they could give that wouldn't turn people against them as characters. I don't really know what to say beyond that, because this felt really, really dark and unnecessary. Um, but yeah, I feel like they kind of backed themselves into a corner, and this was their only option. um, anyway, Ace and Nancy get into another argument about this because, of course, and Ace insists that it was wrong of Nancy to take this memory away from him. Like, he literally says, literal quote, "How could you try to change me like that?" And I have to roll my eyes because, like, it it really feels like the writers were trying to parallel Nancy losing her mom to Ace failing to save this woman. And it's bananas. Like, sorry, Nancy wanted to help you forget a traumatic moment you experienced. Like, watching someone die because they were in a fire that you couldn't stop, I don't think that will bring any positives to your life. That's just trauma. And, like, I don't know how that's living a lie. It's a horrible incident that he shouldn't have had to experience. But to try to argue that this has the same impact as losing a parent, it's so bananas. It's so bananas. How one horrible moment with a woman you don't know versus Nancy losing a parent that she's had 16, 17 years with, and she's had to slowly watch die. It's mind-boggling that the writers tried to make some equivalence between those. Because it's not anywhere close to the same thing. I can't. I can't. But the writers wanting us to think that both sides have equal weight, it's batshit. There's too much nonsense. Anyway, there's quite a bit of things going on beyond this ghost stuff. So a quick rundown of some other plots. George and Nick decide to sell the claw, which felt like a personal attack, because this place is so important to the entire Fanson family. And, like, literally just one day of thinking about it, George is like, yeah, I feel like it's right to let it go. Like, huh? It really just feels like the writers, like, spitting in the face of the people who were holding out hope for Nick and George to get back together, which, like, that hope has kind of been dashed at this point, given Nick and Jade seem kind of serious, and George has started seeing that one guy from, like, her law classes. Like, I don't think any of us had serious hope about them actually getting back together at this point, but it just felt like the writers trying to invalidate everything they had built the past 3 seasons and being like, nah, romance was never meant for them. Like, that was all just a fun little waste of time. Like, it just, it's so upsetting because the Nick and George romance has been built since the start of the show. Like, it was, the building blocks were there before the building blocks for Nancy and Ace, at least in my opinion. Because, like, okay, when George was possessed by Tiffany, Nick obviously was trying to reach Tiffany because he had the personal connection to her. But he seemed extremely concerned for George. Like, he seemed more concerned for George than the rest of the group. And, like, he does not know George that well at this point because basically Nancy's the only person he knew in the group. But nope, George has moved on with this random lawyer boy, and Nick has moved on with Jade, and their former relationship is not really acknowledged beyond the fact that Nick is supposed to co-parent George's sisters. But okay, fine, we'll just pretend that Nick and George didn't plan to get married. We'll just ignore that. Cool. I don't understand how we got here. They seemed so locked in for Endgame, and I'm so bitter about it, and we're moving on. We're moving on. Another thread from this episode is that the Drew crew finds a way to disable, like, the system that the Black Door set up. So while he has not been cured of being the Sin Eater, the Black Door is useless at this point. As a result of dismantling the Black Door, Tristan feels a little bit aimless, and he goes to visit Nancy. They have this very beautiful moment where Tristan confesses that he feels a connection to Nancy, and she echoes this, and they share a kiss. Unfortunately, this is interrupted by the fact that the leader of FFTH, who has heard about the dismantling of the Black Door, she has released large amounts of the black goo at this town gathering. So I don't think anyone will have made it this far if you haven't seen the show. But if anyone has, you're probably sitting there like, holy shit. So they have one episode to cure Tristan of the Sin Eater curse, to cure Nancy and Ace of Temperance's curse, and to cure the residents of the town of the black goo. And yes, we have to do all of that in one episode. It's a mess. So let's get to this disaster. um, so basically, we start the episode with just like a massive crime spree because everyone has been infected with the black goo. The Drew crew comes up with a plan to cure Tristan of the Sin Eater curse, and that should also cure the town if the ritual goes right. So yeah, the team tries to do this ritual, and of course, because we're like 10 minutes into the finale, it doesn't work. Um, and it causes Nancy to have visions. And these visions turn out to be from her past lives. This leads to the realization that Nancy and Tristan's souls are tangled up together due to multiple intersections in past lives, which is what Tristan had been saying about feeling his connection to Nancy in the previous episode. In order for the ritual to actually work, it is required that Nancy and Tristan disentangle their souls. So the group initially suspects that this means that Nancy and Tristan are soulmates and that Nancy had been like Nashua's wife, because one of the memories is Nashua and his wife. But Nancy, Tristan, and Ace enter a dreamscape. And in that dreamscape, we learn that Nancy was not actually the soulmate to the original Sin Eater, but she was one of the town founders. The town founder who tried to kill Nashua. And it just makes me feel the need to circle back to Bess's speech when she was on trial. Because how do you have Bess giving this impassioned speech about missing and murdered Indigenous women and then, like, show your audience a borderline anti-Indigenous hate crime? Like, you clearly didn't internalize what you were monologuing about if you're just gonna show that actual violence. Like, I need more critical thinking skills in the writer's room. And it's also, as I was saying earlier, the writers just keep finding ways to sabotage romances that aren't Nancy and Ace. Because, like, it just feels like the writer's invalidating everything. Because it's like, oh, Nancy and Ace felt this connection, but that connection is not previous love, it's previous hate. So how could they have ever had any true feelings for each other? And it's just, it's annoying. The chemistry is there for Nancy and Tristan, and they're adorable when the writers aren't forcing this bullshit on them. Like, you just want to prop Ace up and invalidate what Nancy and Tristan could have. And fuck off. Anyway, while Nancy, Ace, and Tristan are in this dreamscape, Bess is trying to complete a ritual that will break the bond between Nancy and Tristan's souls. And unfortunately, while that is happening, there is a mob waiting outside the Historical Society that wants to literally burn Bess because they are convinced that she is a witch thanks to the black goo. Yeah. The ritual thankfully works, and Tristan wakes up, but Nancy and Ace are still in the dreamscape, and this is because the ritual has successfully disentangled their souls, but the process has not finished on Nancy's end. But Ace stays behind, so he and Nancy both have their souls destroyed. Tristan completes his ritual to cure him in the town, but unfortunately, before he finishes, the mob throws torches into the Historical Society. And this was just devastating. And Nick insisting he could save the materials inside the building and trying to go inside was just fucking soul crushing. Like, I'm convinced that the writers, like, this decision was born out of the writers being like, "Oh, you didn't think we'd go that far, did you? We're gonna go further than you expect us," because it felt spiteful. Like, why? Why did you have to burn the historical society? Like, Bess already got ousted, and now the whole thing goes up in flames, and she loses all those resources. Like, that's just that's like the biggest loss you could give her. And this is the series finale. Like, woof. Anyway, we're down to the last 15 minutes. So now it's wrap up time. And honestly, I think the wrap up portion of the finale was like as close to perfect as the writers could get it. Nancy and Tristan say goodbye. Obviously, in my opinion, they deserve to be endgame, but I knew it wasn't going to happen because I know these writers. And as Tristan is now cured, he's planning to leave Horseshoe Bay and live his life on the sea like he dreamed about, which he deserves. So that's a very well-deserved win. I'm happy for him. Um, I hope he has a wonderful life outside of Horseshoe Bay. Nancy then says goodbye to Carson, as it's implied she's planning to leave town as well. And that scene made me sob. Nancy and Carson, best father-daughter duo of all time. I love them. I miss them. Very good scene. After Nancy says goodbye to Carson, she has like a get together with the rest of the crew minus Ace. And we hear the plans for what they're doing. So George is leaving for law school. Nick and Jade are leaving for Atlanta to work for Tom Swift because the writers had to throw in another Tom Swift mention since his show got canceled. And then Bess is staying to run the new historical society, which she has to build from scratch, as I've already kind of alluded to. And Nancy mentions that she is on a mission to track down other sin eaters in the country, as that practice had become a bit more widespread after the success of the original sin eater in Horseshoe Bay. She then has a one-on-one goodbye with Ace, where he offhandedly mentions that he's planning to go to college to become an ME, which, like, sure, that tracks given he was working at the morgue. So everyone is getting their happy endings. Yay, I guess. Nancy and Ace kiss to test if Temperance's curse is indeed broken, since their souls are gone. They're destroyed. And nothing happens, so they joyously determine that it's fine. The series then ends with the five of them saying goodbye to the Claw, and it's incredibly bittersweet. But honestly, the only fitting ending I think the writers could have given the show, because how else do you wrap things up if not them saying goodbye to this location where they became a family? And I can't make it through the final scene without crying. It's just obvious how much that location meant to the five of them, and like the gravity of them going their separate ways because they don't know when they'll all be together again, if they'll all be together again. It's fantastic and lovely acting from all of them, and I'm sure they were all genuinely very sad about the cancellation because they didn't know going into the season that it was the final season. But like, to be honest, other than this wrap-up segment in the finale, I don't know how I feel about the season, because like so much happened and yet nothing happened. Because like there's just all this stuff that felt like it was being built up and then went nowhere, which, to be fair, some of that is because they had to rush through certain things. And then, like, they were backtracking and undoing things that felt significant. And, like, it's just perplexing because the season felt like it started with a lot of promise. But then, like, I just can't imagine the audience wanted, like, 2/3 of the decisions that the writers made. Because, like, who wanted Bess losing the Historical Society? Who asked for George selling the claw? Like, I'm ecstatic for the writers following through on George going to law school, but, like, who asked for her to leave Horseshoe Bay? Who asked for her to leave her family? Because, like, the writers have literally hit us over the head repeatedly with the fact that she is their sole caretaker, and, like, that her mom is not stable enough to support her sisters, and she's leaving. Her and Nick, the two stable adults in the fan sisters' lives, like, they're both leaving town, possibly permanently. Like, genuinely, who asked for that? Please tell me who asked for that. Also, super random, but, like, we start the season with Nancy on a case to find a missing ferret, and the ferret kept coming back up over and over, and then we never get resolution about the goddamn ferret. Like, what was that? What was that? You couldn't take 5 minutes to have her find the fucking ferret? Like, for real? And, like, it feels like they needed to do that, especially since they had Ace actually capture the ferret and then let it go because he was a piss baby about seeing her and Tristan dance. Like, why did they spend so much time on the goddamn ferret and then not resolve it? Like, I'm getting annoyed again. I'm gonna stop. As I said at the start of the video, please keep talking about Palestine. Please participate in protests if you can. Please contact your representatives. Please continue boycotting. Please amplify voices on Instagram and Twitter if you use those. Beyond that, please wear masks and stay safe if you're going out. I think I mentioned in my previous video that there's a vaccine that came out, like, early October, for newer variants of COVID. Thank you so much for listening to this. I always really appreciate when people listen to my longer videos, so if you made it all the way to the end, huge thank you. Hopefully I'll catch you again in the future. But no worries if you want to dip after this, because I don't know if I'll be talking about Nancy Drew again. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and goodbye.